we were taking the process of building a world seriously, and it wasn't just churned out, and that it had a strong sense of continuity. And we've always tried to do that with our ancillary products like the D&D line and our novels. We're kind of painstakingly anal about making sure that all the details add up, that the continuity is held to be sacred, so that no matter in what medium you're experiencing Warcraft, it all feels like a contiguous experience. Hope you really enjoy WoW. Hope that some of this story and history comes off and that we've done our job well and you feel like you're a part of it. Better yet, you feel like you're at the heart of it. Would even be better. So once again, thanks for listening and have a good one. Bye-bye.
If you haven't realized already, that sexy voice you just heard is Chris Metzen, and it comes from the original World of Warcraft Collector's Edition, a behind-the-scenes set of interviews. And that video is fascinating and depressing, because the longer you watch it, the clearer it becomes that the original developers knew exactly what they were doing and what actually mattered. Then you look at retail and even something like Season of Discovery, and you realize that the current team has almost nothing in common with that previous mindset. The original footage is over an hour long, and I genuinely recommend watching it yourself after you watch this. But here, I will focus on 7 most important key moments that show just how far World of Warcraft has drifted from the spirit it was built on. Sadly, this video directly contradicts some of the core design choices in retail today, in the most objective possible ways. Alright, let's start.
Just off the top of my head, a funny thing was that when we were originally designing this game, we were thinking about maybe taking it in a different direction, maybe a little darker or a different look and feel, but we soon realized that Warcraft had a very established look and that it would be a big mistake to deviate from that.
So Warcraft has a very established look and feel, and it would be a big mistake to deviate from that. I wonder how this person would react if I went back in time and showed them this, or this, an undead member of the mighty horde. Would this count as that big mistake he talked about? Because this is night and day. This has nothing to do with Warcraft or how it should look and feel. People used to respond to my videos saying that Transmog is great for MMOs, that players should have the freedom to express themselves. First of all, it's not just about Transmogs. For example, let me show you this very Warcraft looking mount. More importantly, it seems like the original creators didn't think this would be a small mistake. They imagined it to be a big mistake. And of course, I agree. At a fundamental level, I think Transmog is bad for an MMO. Visual progression is progression, and progression is maybe the most important aspect of an MMO. With Transmog, you have no idea what another player does or what they're good at just by looking at them, and that is a mistake. But it goes even deeper than that. Player self-expression should never take priority over the world itself making sense. What is this, a therapy session? If you want pink wings and to look like a toddler going to the beach with his parents, maybe the game enabling that at the cost of its visual identity and atmosphere just isn't worth it. I don't know, go paint, go write, go to therapy, express yourself through World of Warcraft Transmogs my ass. And beyond totally betraying Warcraft's original look, it doesn't even make sense in modern World of Warcraft itself. Yes, the game is soft and kid-friendly now, but darker, more Warcraft-appropriate Transmogs still exist. They look good and they fit in with the original vibe. But right next to them you have this crap. The game doesn't have an identity anymore. Not a Warcraft one, not any kind of identity. All of it traded away, so people who don't even like or care about this universe can play World of Warcraft like it's a dress-up miniclip game. So that there is something for everyone. That is such a stupid way to design anything in a video game. A friend of all is a friend to none. You cannot meaningfully please anyone that is actually looking for a great gaming experience if what you do is try to please everyone. You should find your identity and stick to it. World of Warcraft had one of the greatest identities this industry had to offer to begin with, and traded it for this.
This world has always been sort of divided by the Alliance and the Horde. You've always had the orcs and the humans clashing together, and now, as the franchise grows, we have more and more races that are becoming involved with the conflict and taking sides. So we really wanted to get across that this world, sort of the world itself, felt divided, that within the Alliance lands, you got a lot more of sort of a lush, beautiful forest and valleys, fields, jungles. It's very colorful and beautiful most of the time. You'll find this very inviting and warm. As opposed to that, you'll run through the Horde lands and you'll find that there's this very desolate theme of sand and rock and just brushy barrens, and they're even named as such.
Remember this? Alliance, Horde. Now imagine telling that guy that today I can form parties, guilds, raid, queue, and basically do everything with anyone, Horde or Alliance. Those two iconic factions that supposedly divide and define the world, as he says in the video, they mean absolutely nothing now. Gameplay wise, there are no real restrictions left. Racials are so carefully sanded down that outside the top 0.1% you can pick any race and feel zero difference, which also means most racials have to be bland as hell by design, just to not interfere with balance, God forbid. From a world building perspective, the Horde and Alliance dynamic was already getting messed since TBC, when every expansion turned into we must unite to fight the greater evil. But recently they completely erased whatever was left of it. Another core pillar that originally defined World of Warcraft is just gone. And to be clear, I'm not saying that the game should never evolve. Freezing World of Warcraft in time would also be very stupid. But core elements should be respected while the game evolves and changes. The Horde and the Alliance divide was a core aspect of the game, and it gave World of Warcraft a unique identity and a genuinely cool dynamic that no other MMO managed to pull off. And this total removal of faction identity wasn't even done because Blizzard believed the game would be better that way. If that were the reason, they'd still be wrong, but the reality is even worse. This happened because of population problems. Shadowlands happened, player numbers hit lows nobody expected, and outside expansion launches, the game just isn't that healthy anymore because it's lame and uninspired. Blizzard needed a system that works when populations drop, and strict faction separation doesn't survive low player counts. That's the real reason. Everything else is just a marketing spin. And looping back to the vibe and look of the game, the idea of Horde and Alliance doesn't exist anymore in that sense either. Especially on the Horde side, the faction doesn't look or feel anything like it used to. Vulpera in particular, for example, are a nonsense cringe race with almost no real lore, very obviously added to appeal to furry gooners and nothing else.
Warcraft's essentially kind of third or fourth generation fantasy, which is kind of crazy these days, where you have kind of a lot of video game fantasy universes becoming the new school kind of settings. You have a lot of interactive games kind of taking place in these worlds that are, essentially phantoms of Tolkien's vision back in the day. Warcraft's certainly part of that tradition, elves and dwarves and dragons and such. One of the things we always thought was a good idea is holding on to the more traditional fantasy archetypes, because that's what most people kind of glom onto. It's that familiarity of dwarves and elves and magic rings and things that kind of define what fantasy is. And we found that, people like that. People are really drawn to that. It's a strength of the genre, whether in video games or just, fiction. If you're reading a novel, it's the familiarity that really sings to people over and over. But we've always liked the idea of kind of spinning those archetypes on their head. What happens when elves go crazy as a race? What happens when dark elves suddenly are heroic and noble? What happens when orcs, that are typically, mindless and brutal, what happens when they're kind of given some nobility? And we can kind of begin to identify with these races and cultures.
Again, I'm not going to harp on this too much, but it's worth repeating. Madsen himself has openly said Tolkien's tradition was a core pillar of Warcraft. The whole point was taking that classic Tolkien fantasy and twisting it in interesting ways, like turning orcs into noble, intelligent, sometimes even diplomatic beings. That's the foundation of Warcraft. That's the foundation it was built on, long before World of Warcraft even existed. And keep in mind, Madsen had already been at the top of this universe for 9 years at this point. And at no moment did he feel the game needed cute pink fairy wings or the fucking Vulpera. What's interesting is how deliberately he talks about these races and how they diverge from the standard Tolkien trajectory most fantasy worlds blindly follow. There was actual thought and intent behind them, and because of that, every race felt important, it felt handcrafted. In vanilla, all races were meaningful, they were woven into the world and its lore. Orcs, humans, gnomes, trolls, everyone had moments, and every race had notable figures showing up across the world at all times. This is something Blizzard already started fumbling in TBC, and by BFA it completely fell apart. From TBC onward, for example, the Draenei and the Blood Elves basically peaked in their debut expansion, and after that they blended into the background with everyone else. Present, yes, but not really important at all. Sure, Legion gave the Draenei some extra love, and Midnight will shine the spotlight on Blood Elves again. But that's the problem. Modern World of Warcraft keeps flooding the game with new races. In the last 7 years alone, we've gotten more playable races than we did in the first 15, and that includes the original vanilla lineup. Every expansion adds at least one new race, which gets to matter for a bit, sometimes not even for the full expansion, and then gets tossed aside like most of the others. The last time the undead were even remotely relevant was Shadowlands, and even then it was not great. Kultirans did something in BFA and will likely never matter again beyond super minor moments. And of course this happens, because we're approaching 30 playable races. That sounds cool on paper, and it could be, but not when it completely nukes the game's identity, and not when none of these races get consistent relevance. Since at least Shadowlands, tell me, what meaningful moments have the Vulpera, Kultirans, Zandalari trolls, the undead or the Draenei actually had? The honest answer is basically none. Races in modern World of Warcraft, like everything else, are part of a seasonal immersion-breaking rotation. Each expansion has room for maybe 3 to 4 relevant races, at maximum. One of those slots is instantly taken by the shiny new race, which of course is playable by both Horde and the Alliance, because remember, factions don't matter anymore. That leaves 2 or maybe 3 older races to do something, while everyone else waits their turn at the relevance table until the next expansion drops. It is stupid, it is bad for the game, it is immersion breaking, but hey, pumping out new races that are basically uninspired elf variations keep World of Warcraft addicts who crave quantity over soul playing and paying. So naturally, Blizzard will happily serve up these 100 variations of elf.
With World of Warcraft, we were really trying to look at other massively multiplayer online RPGs and try to identify what were the elements of those games that were fun. And as we went through it, we would find that people really enjoyed the aspects of being online with multitudes of other players, and they loved leveling up their character and working on their equipment and working on their skills. With World of Warcraft, we put in a great questing system, so right at the beginning of the game, you have objectives. You get pulled right into the world, you have quests filling up your quest log, so you always are doing something for the characters in the environment.
Every time that you log into the game, you can accomplish something. Even though you might not achieve a new level that night of gameplay, you might finish 1 or 2 quests, or you might earn a new rank in a trade skill or explore a new zone. And that was something that we really tried to hit on. That way you're not so focused on the experience bar the entire time you're playing. Your only goal in the game is not necessarily leveling up, but it's completing quests and visiting new areas, learning new skills, sort of always developing your character. And oftentimes players find that they level up and they don't even realize that they're close to leveling.
Remember that? The thing this guy keeps talking about? Progression in a fucking MMO. Wild concept, I know. Almost like it's kind of the whole point. Does retail World of Warcraft have any relevant progression left at all? I think a very few basic questions will help us answer that. What happens if you play World of Warcraft like a rabid animal for one whole month? 14 hours a day, and then quit. And then you come back a year later. You had great gear for the first season. Now you're probably in the last season of the expansion, and random questing greens are better than what you sacrificed your sanity for. Probably even pre-max level green questing rewards. Okay, what about 3 months? That's plenty of time for a new season to fully settle in. Is that full month of no life grinding worth anything? Again, not really, because any casual Mythic Plus player or a normal raider will be ahead of you. Anyone even slightly competitive will be so far ahead you won't ever get into their groups. Okay, what about 3 days? Even 3 damn days, depending when they happen, can be more than enough to invalidate most of your progress. If you take a 3-day break right at the start of a new season, any mediocre player will catch up to you. Your other rabid animal friends that play non-stop will be long gone in 3 days, and you'll only catch up again once they hit that seasonal plateau and slow down their progression naturally. But not sooner than that. That's the system working as intended. And that is the point. This is a seasonal grindfest made to trick your brain. You are not playing an MMO. You are playing a few months long content patch over and over in every way imaginable, nothing more. But as you can see, when the original developers talked about progression, they meant something very different. Progression wasn't just item levels. It came from leveling, from questing, from exploring, from progression, from actually being part of the world. All of that is gone completely, and I genuinely do not believe even the most unhinged World of Warcraft fanboy can defend that aspect anymore. Everything between character creation and being raid ready is a rushed, soulless conveyor belt of content. It has exactly one redeeming quality. At least it's goddamn fast. Immersion doesn't matter. Exploration doesn't matter. Something as basic as discovering a new zone and feeling stronger because you understand the world better being progression. Retail has nothing to do with that anymore. And here's the paradox though. On paper, you're always progressing, right? Because you log in and complete 20 quests, because each one takes 2 minutes. You run 10 dungeons and a raid without ever leaving the main capital. You unlock 3 new achievements, you get a new pet, a new reputation tier, some new transmog, a mount, finish the trader's posts, grab a new title, a toy, a housing decoration, a new item that will be replaced next week, maybe even access to a whole new race, who knows? You can even get that new race character all the way to max level, all in the same day. You are constantly bombarded with progression, but it's all meaningless because none of it asks anything of you. No effort, no friction, no commitment of any kind. It's pure brain rot. That is what it is. A non-stop stream of tiny dopamine hits engineered to keep you hooked the same way TikTok keeps toddlers locked in watching Tralalero Tralala and 6-7 videos on loop. That is you playing World of Warcraft.
What you'll notice when you start playing World of Warcraft is the user interface is somewhat minimal. You don't really need a manual to play the game. You know, everything about the interface is really towards keeping you in the game. We really don't like to have players go to the manual or go to the website just to figure out how to play the game.
The first time that you log in, it's very intuitive and easy to use, but
This one would actually be funny if it wasn't so sad. The developers praising themselves because you don't need a manual to play the game, usually in the context of the UI being intuitive enough to figure it out on your own. That used to be true, but if they could see the game now, they'd realize you absolutely do need a manual just to understand the UI, and even that will not get you very far because you also have to learn how to actually play the game and navigate a pile of convoluted systems on top of that. And this isn't me complaining about difficulty. Difficulty isn't the issue. The real problem, which they even mention in this video, is the constant need to leave the game to learn how to play the damn game. In BFA and the first season of Shadowlands, I was a Mythic Raider and pushed high-level Mythic Plus keys as a Discipline Priest, not an easy class to play. I genuinely loved the gameplay, but I could do that because I had a group of 4 other friends. Grouping was instant, mistakes were tolerated, and learning was actually fun because of that. 3 of them had never played WoW before, so we had to slow down a lot and figure things out together. Even me and the other guy that played before, we were never more than mediocre before that. So we rolled fresh characters with a clear goal, learn the gameplay properly and reach endgame. So we learned together starting at level 1. Trying to learn all that alone is torture though. First of all, in many ways, it's not even possible. Until you hit max level, you're stuck queuing leveling dungeons. Content where the tank is usually some twinked out guardian druid pulling half the instance and deleting it in one go. You learn nothing. Zero. The same applies to normal and heroic dungeons in the current expansion. And since there aren't that many new players left in this godforsaken game, good luck finding a group at max level that's willing to tolerate the fact that you're new when you actually queue for a Mythic Plus. That's your first real dungeon. Now imagine trying to tank or to heal that. The group disbands after 2 pulls, which of course also happen to be the first 2 meaningful pulls you've ever done. You don't know anything, and the game never gave you a chance to learn. Yes, we have the AI system with the bots and stuff, but they are not gonna prepare you for the super high-paced stuff that you will see in a time-gated Mythic Plus run. So what do? You go online. You memorize a 12-button rotation you could never have discovered organically because up until that point every mob died into abilities. You study dungeon mechanics, you endure barely getting invited to groups and constant disbands whenever you make a mistake, you grind through an immersion-breaking, miserable experience for many hours just to reach the point where you are allowed to start playing. And then come the systems. Tokens, crests, crafted gear, BOEs, dailies, weeklies, the vault, world bosses, best in slot farming. MMOs are complex by nature, and I get that, but World of Warcraft is genuinely one of the worst games at explaining what the hell is going on for a new player, and that's one of the reasons we don't have new players. I know that because after the 4 friends I mentioned quit during Shadowlands when everything went to shit, I tried to get another friend into the game before I finally found my home in Classic. That guy played solo until around level 40 and something, and just said, yeah, screw this, I don't get any of this is too complicated, I'm out. And this wasn't some clueless player, he's one of the best warriors in Europe in BDO. The guy knows MMOs. And if you think I'm exaggerating, fine. Go watch Day 9, a former professional StarCraft player and still a high-level competitive gamer trying to play retail WoW. He was completely lost.
Where are my spells to cast? I'm like so confused, man. I like don't understand. This is like the most played MMO of all time, and I'm like sitting here and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a really weird expansion here, and I want to Frost Mage, I want to cast. I want things to be really.
This is someone who mastered StarCraft, a game so complex it melts your brain, and even getting to max level in retail was a struggle for him. If you have not played for at least the last 10 years, like most players do, this game does nothing to help you understand all of its stupid complexities. So no, the game is not easy to get into anymore, not even close. You are constantly forced out of the game to read guides just to barely function. This is something the developers explicitly said they wanted to avoid, and somehow still failed at. And it does matter a lot, because it makes the game much worse. And because every time you have to tab out to understand what's happening, the illusion and the immersion breaks. The world stops being a world, it's just a soulless slop machine.
It gives you that feeling that the world is real and solid and that you have a purpose in it.
One of the challenges of developing a massively multiplayer RPG is how do you get people to start grouping in the game? How do you get people to really take part in the community?
Well, apparently you don't. Everything is solo, and the moments you are forced to play with others mean nothing and they are still solo because no one says a fucking word. Everything happens through your eyes, through buttons, while you sit in a main city. You are not part of a world, you are sitting still, waiting to be fed slop content. This game could be nothing more than a menu teleporting you to the instance or the spot where you do your daily work quests. And it would not change a thing. And if the AI was good enough, they could literally make this game totally single player and it would not matter at all.
Another one of the core tenets about World of Warcraft when it comes to what we might refer to as our elder game or endgame is that while we really are trying to do a really interesting and deep raid game for guilds that want to take on dragons and these powerful creatures, we didn't want our elder game to only be about raid content. We also are trying to provide high endgame PvP content for players, and we also wanted to have our world have a sense of community and have some dynamic things that change throughout the world. In the raid game, a lot of these creatures, as you progress through them, will not even be available when the game first goes live. Like one example that we've talked about is the concept of Outland, which we introduced in Warcraft 3. And Outland is this area that actually is on another kind of planet that is beyond the Dark Portal. And the Dark Portal has been closed for many years. Players on each of the different realms will have to find out how to open the Dark Portal again. And only once the players of each of these realms open that Dark Portal will people be able to go through it and find all the Uber creatures beyond that.
First of all, it's genuinely fascinating to see that what we eventually got with the opening of the Gates of Ankiraj was originally planned for the reopening of the Dark Portal. I knew Outland was meant to be part of vanilla at some point, but I had no idea that the original war effort concept was supposed to be implemented there. Secondly, this is where things get interesting, because here we can see something they never really nailed in vanilla, even though they mentioned that they wanted to and that it is important. And there is an argument to be made that retail handles this better, depending on how you look at it. They talk about Endgame and how they didn't want raiding to be the sole focus of the game. How there should be more reasons to play at max level. And yeah, in Classic, once you hit 60, your options are pretty much raid log or PvP. Raid logging is raid logging. It sucks. There's nothing to defend there. It's easily the saddest part of the Classic experience. As for PvP, we didn't even have the honor system at launch, and when it did arrive, it was a complete mess. No one looks back fondly on vanilla honor grinding, and I don't think that any expansion since has missed it. It's fair to say that Classic's endgame is not its strongest suit, not at all, and anyone denying that is deep in Classic Andy territory. Retail, on the other hand, does do this better. There is simply more to do. Mythic Plus is genuinely one of the best ideas Blizzard ever had for making endgame content evergreen. Delves now add another layer. PvP is still bad, but at least it's playable. From a pure activity count perspective, retail wins easily. But here's the problem. As I said, progression doesn't matter. So if you are looking for an actual MMO, like really looking for an MMO, well, tough luck, because progression is not part of the game anymore. The biggest sin an MMO can commit. So does it really matter that there's more to do when your progress is fundamentally disposable? When nothing you earn has long-term meaning? When every few months the game wipes the slate clean and tells you to do it all again? Quantity doesn't automatically beat quality, especially not in a genre built around persistence of progress as a core value. And this is where going back to vanilla complicates the there's nothing to do at endgame argument, because the world in vanilla actually feels real. Endgame isn't just a checklist. Even though most players technically end up raid logging on the PvE side, and that's bad, the game itself enables alternative ways to exist in it. Hardcore is the best modern example of this. If you play hardcore, hitting level 60 isn't the end, it's the beginning of an entirely new journey. Pre-raid best in slot farming starts. That means endless dungeon runs, including endgame and sometimes even low-level dungeons. A lot of gold farming, questing, reputation grinds, preparation, hundreds of hours just to be ready to raid. And in hardcore, it goes even further than that, because guilds are tighter, because they have to be. If there's a level 60 shaman in your guild, that person has a real in-game value to your progression. Helping them survive, gear up and stay alive benefits everyone, including you. The game naturally encourages cooperation beyond your own personal checklist. So even when people do not need anything from a dungeon, they still join runs just to help you or someone else in the group from time to time. I've been helped like that plenty of times, and I've done the same runs myself when needed, especially as a tank or a healer. Anyway, eventually you do get to raid log. But even those raids aren't mindless loot conveyor belts. Every pull matters a lot. Every mistake has consequences. Every boss is very tense. Loot doesn't feel routine, it feels earned and very important. I personally cleared Molten Core, Onyxia and Blackwing Lair in hardcore. I did step foot in AQ, but while I never died in there, I was never part of a Khatoon kill. And even that felt insanely rewarding. The journey itself was the whole point. And sure, in theory, you could go all of the way and see Kel'Thuzad fall. And at that point, yes, the journey is over. But not only most people didn't complete that journey yet, but I also find it very hard to believe that anyone who actually made it would say it wasn't worth it. That, to me, is a great closure moment. That is what an MMO journey is supposed to be. And when you finish it, you don't feel empty because you're ready to step away or take a break, knowing you just experienced something that very few games will ever manage to replicate. And hey, if Classic Plus is good and it comes out in less than 5 years, the journey also does not have to stop there anymore. Anyway guys, that was the video. A huge thanks to you if you watched all the way through. It really matters more than you think. Please consider liking and subscribing if you liked the video, and maybe check this other video where I talk about why the races of retail are nothing but a soulless mess. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Till next time, peace.